Hello, I'm Caroline Hodge, an MD PhD candidate in the Department of Anthropology. I'd like first to extend my thanks to the organizers of this year's virtual Penn Grad Talks. I'm excited to be here to share a little of my research, which broadly explores the dynamics of birth control use in the American Midwest, focusing on how people understand the impacts that contraception has on their bodies, lives, and relationships. Today, I'm going to bring you all into a slice of that work by looking at the boom in fertility tracking apps and what they reveal about the stakes of contemporary contraceptive use. The femtech sector is poised to have a market potential of $50 billion by 2025. Key to this so-called femtech revolution are scores of apps designed to track the user's menstrual cycle and to predict ovulation and thus fertility. These apps digitize an ancient practice of fertility awareness, feeding data points like the timing and duration of menstruation, daily basal body temperature, and observations about vaginal discharge, cervical mucus, mood, and libido, and even when you have sex, through proprietary algorithms that learn your cycle, getting better and better each month at predicting when you'll ovulate, when your period will come, and how you might feel when it does. In general, these apps promise to equip users with self-knowledge, bringing women, for these apps almost all employ a slippage between women and people who menstruate, control over their bodies, their fertility, and implicitly their futures. These apps and the analog fertility awareness methods that long predate them, like the rhythm method, work by leveraging an understanding of, quote, normal reproductive physiology. That is, biological females are presumed to have a menstrual cycle of about 28 days, with days 1 to 5 representing the menses or period, and ovulation occurring on day 14. The egg is viable for about 24 hours post-ovulation, and sperm can live in the reproductive tract for up to 5 days. The window of fertility, that is, where egg could meet sperm and fuse to become zygote, embryo, fetus, then baby, actually then represents a fairly small portion of the cycle. In other words, as much as pop culture and sex ed scare tactics would like teens to think that they could get pregnant anytime they have sex, we know that the chances of conceiving are localized to the window right around ovulation. The apps are built around this physiology. You input your data and the app tells you whether or not you're, quote, in the window. If you avoid the kind of sex that could result in a pregnancy on the days that the app predicts are fertile days, you're using the app as contraception. Though Natural Cycles is the only app that the FDA has yet cleared to market itself explicitly as contraception, many others offer functionally the same capabilities, just with the legal caveat that they're not technically contraception. These apps are wildly popular, downloaded by an estimated 100 million people worldwide. Of course, not all the users are relying on the apps as their sole or even their primary form of contraception, but a significant subset of them are. This data is pretty hard to come by, but estimates in the US suggest that as many as 1 million women are using it this way. Historically, fertility awareness methods have been most popular among highly religious women. Natural family planning, as it's called in the Catholic context, offers a way for women to control their fertility without contravening church prohibitions on contraception. And certainly religious women may use the apps, but in general, the fertility tracking boom targets itself at a different demographic, namely highly educated liberal women who are worried about the near-term side effects and long-term safety of using synthetic hormones to prevent pregnancy, and who are invested in scientific, data-driven options that nevertheless remain in their control. So, what are we to make of the boom in fertility tracking apps? The industry would like us to believe that this is the cutting edge of contraceptive innovation, and yet there are many reasons to be skeptical. A productive seam of feminist critique homes in on how many of these apps, putatively designed for women, actually really fail them in a number of ways. They point to the gendered assumptions about femininity that underlie many of the user interfaces, and to the ways in which apps promising personalized guidance tailored to individual bodies often can't reliably parse even normal experiences in reproductive life. One journalist, for instance, recounts how the app interpreted her pregnancy as a 280-day cycle. This is to say nothing of the experiences of people whose baseline physiology deviates too far from the, quote, norm. For instance, as we see in people with irregular cycles, the app can't accommodate their experiences at all. In this way, an app which might knock loose our problematic assumptions about the normal actually serves to reinscribe them. Such apps also represent enormous repositories of personal data. In the best case scenarios, we can imagine this data being used to advance our understanding of reproductive health. Tranches of data with granular detail of millions of menstrual cycles might be productively used to ameliorate long-standing and at this point well-documented lacunae in medical science. While some of this research potential is being realized, more often what happens is that the data is sold and the privacy of the individuals who furnished it is compromised. The intimate data that these apps hold, from the timing of periods to details about sexual encounters to information about sexually transmitted diseases, can all too easily end up in the hands of marketers. We should place our concerns about privacy and surveillance with these apps in the context of broader abuses in the regulation of reproductive health in the US. From coercive sterilizations in California prisons as recently as 2009, to recent allegations of the same among ICE detainees, to abortion restrictions passed in the name of women's safety that medical experts agree are nothing more than cleverly packaged misogyny, including a Missouri audit where state officials were tracking menstrual cycles of Planned Parenthood patients, to the slut-shaming of women who advocate for access to contraception. We have every reason to be deeply concerned about the ways in which such voluntary, intimate surveillance, as law professor Karen Levy calls period tracker apps, might ultimately be turned against the women who use them. And while these apps certainly offer new ways into the thorny problem of regulating women's bodies, of the stakes of data and surveillance, and of the potential for new forms of self-knowledge, I want to end on a slightly different note, thinking about what attending to these apps might reveal about contraception and fertility control itself. In both medical and public discourses about contraception, fertility awareness methods, the methods that these apps bring into the 21st century, are often marginalized or dismissed. This happens for a lot of reasons. On the one hand, it's easy to think of these methods as sort of niche, and on the other hand, doctors tend to be skeptical of their effectiveness, preferring instead to promote birth control technologies that, quote, really work to prevent pregnancy, like the pill or the IUD. And then, of course, there's also the fact that these apps sit uncomfortably in the category of contraception to begin with. The same data can be used either to prevent a pregnancy or to optimize the chances of conception, depending on how you act on it. Rather than circumscribing them out of the conversation when we talk about birth control, I'm finding in my research that these apps offer us a way to see very clearly just how much is at stake for people seeking to control their fertility. If it were simply a matter of preventing pregnancy, everyone would have an IUD, and yet women are increasingly turning to the apps. In this turn, they are telling us, among other things, that birth control is so much more than pregnancy prevention. It's about how they understand and wish to mediate their bodies. It's about the kinds of relationships they want and the sorts of families they imagine having. Holding on to these experiences and taking them seriously seems like a good place to start as we imagine what the next generation of contraception might look like. Thank you.